One of the purposes of this podcast is to meet Catholic women where they are in the journey, in the midst of uncontrollable circumstances and overwhelm, offering them tools and practical ways to keep them going when the road is hard. One of the ways that we can do that is by learning about others who have gone before us to share stories and wisdom from men and women who have been touched by God in a profound way, so that we can be reminded that there is a path forward to holiness and it does not lie in despair, but in hope and joy of the present moment. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Persistence in Prayer podcast hosted by Catholic mindset coach, wife, mother, educator, and speaker Kylie Hine. Kylie is passionate about helping you deepen your relationship with God through the power of prayer. This podcast is a space for high achievers who want to do it all, but also want to prioritize their spiritual life and grow in faith. Join us as we explore the beauty of persistence in prayer and the transformative impact it can have on our lives. Get ready to discover practical tips, insights, and inspiration to help you develop a daily prayer practice and cultivate a deeper sense of trust in God's plan for your life. Let's journey together towards a more fulfilled and faithful life as we invite the Holy Spirit in. Let's begin. Today, I am blessed by a very special guest, and she is going to help me share some of these stories. Stories of a man who is on the way to sainthood, Cardinal Nguyen Van Thuan. Elisabeth, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Kylie, and I'm so happy to be here.
You are such a joy already. I've enjoyed our conversation just even before pressing record, and I know we're going to talk a lot about your brother, but I would just love to learn a little bit about you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, fine. Yeah.
Tell me about you, about growing up, and you told me you've been in Canada for the last 50 years. Just share with me a little bit about you and your family.
Yes, so I was born after the China War and prior to the Vietnam War. So I'm in the middle. So the country was in much of chaos. So the schooling was very disrupted. Therefore, I was able to get to go overseas to study. And I was with the Ursuline nuns in France. So first primary school and secondary school with the Ursuline nuns. And then after that, I got a scholarship to Australia because at that time, everybody said that you need to get into the English language because that's the going language. And so I applied and I got a scholarship to go to Sydney, Australia. And I went to university there. And while I was there, Vietnam fell in communist hand. So after I got my degree, I got married and moved to Canada. My parents and my siblings, sisters and their family came to Australia later as refugees. My parents passed away in Australia, and I still have my son in Australia and a sister in Australia. But I myself have been to Canada. I've always, for some reason, even from my youth, dream of those snowy mountains and all of that. Yeah, so I became a teacher and then administrator, and I retired in 2008.
What did you teach?
I teach French philosophy and literature. Yeah.
Okay, so lots of smarties in your family. You have a deep Catholic past with your ancestors and your family. I know you came from a big family. And if I remember right, when I was reading, you said you were with the Ursuline nuns. Your brother was a cardinal, or you had a brother who was a cardinal. And if I remember right, two of your sisters at some point spent some time with the Carmelites as well. Is that right?
Yes, my sister Bernadette, who came right after Francis, my brother twin, she was with the Carmelite in Vietnam for a long time. But then she had tuberculosis. So she wasn't able to stay there because the Carmelites lived so close together and they were afraid of contagiousness. My sister, who is now also alive in Sydney, also entered the Carmelite in Vietnam, but due to her very fragile health, she couldn't last. Yeah. But my ancestors were converted to Catholic faith in the 18th century. So we came from a family that is so devoted to the faith from that time. And they were all converted by the missionaries of Paris. And then later on, also, they worked together as catechists and in the parishes with all the redemptorists from Quebec, Canada, who were sent there. I remember very well Father LaRouche with a long beard from Canada, and he knows Vietnamese and the Central accent just like any Vietnamese. And I remember all the time him coming every Friday for dinner, but before dinner, he will listen to my grandmother's confession
Oh.
every Friday, never stop, because we loved it. Because every time Father LaRouche comes, my grandmother has all kinds of good food. So we kids say, "Oh, Friday," you know. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I love that. It also just reminds us of how important that work of the missionaries is, which I know is something your brother talked about, just all of us being called to evangelization, to speaking the word of God, but we don't always see the fruits of that. And so something that happened so long ago, this conversion of your family, and now we're seeing this kind of play out in your life, but also in your brother who is on his way to becoming a saint, which is really incredible.
Yeah, it's just incredible. And so my brother would always said that, "Oh, I just lived among holy men and women." And he refers them to all his teachers who in the minor seminary as well as in the major seminary, they were all missionaries from Europe. And he said those are the men and women who left their bones and bodies on our soil so that we can grow in faith. And one of them in particular is Bishop Eurysia. He was a teacher when my brother just entered the minor seminary, and then he became later a bishop and ordained my brother, and again ordained my brother as a bishop.
That is so cool.
Yeah, I know. And then when the communists came in 75, they asked that all the missionaries should leave Vietnam. And Bishop Erisha returned to Alsace in France. He died there. But the people who witnessed his last days in France, he always said, "I just pray and offered everything so that my former student, Bishop Thuan, would be released from prison." And he died in 79. And my brother was at that time not released yet. But that's the connection, between them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for those people who aren't aware of your brother, we're going to talk about his story. He was in prison for 13 years, but there's so much more to that, just before and after, even going back to childhood. I remember reading in the book, your mom had said, when you are in lessons or playing on the playground, never forget that you live in the presence of God. And that was something that stuck with him. That teaching, the teachings of St. Paul, Saint Therese of Lisieux, that he was very rooted in the saints and in scripture, just like you said, surrounded by these holy men and women of the present, but also of the past.
Oh, yes. And in your prayer, the word that really stuck to my mind right now is the present moment.
Mm.
Yeah. And so my mother lived that, I think, to perfection because I wasn't born yet. But my brother said she always reminded him each morning going to church. They get up together at 5:30 and they go to mass. And my brother would say that, yeah, mom always said, "Tuan, each moment connected with God is already in paradise." So every moment, every step that you take to walk to church, you just have to try to know that walking with God all the time together. And we already can see that paradise is already in each present moment when we are with Him. And so in prison, he said that there were days when he's so desperate and filled with hatred and frustration. But then suddenly a voice would say, remember what mom said to you.
Mhm.
God is always with you. And for us too, in moment of darkness, I would just said, oh, but this is the cross that you want me to carry with you. And I know that you will be there with me and I will get through this. And that helps. Yeah.
Yeah, I borrowed that phrase this morning as I was sending my kids off to school.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is so simple, but yet it is something that helps you say that, oh, I am under a watchful eye of God. So therefore, I need to live in a way that is worth that moment with God.
Yeah,
And it's not pressure, but some people say, oh, isn't it a pressure to be always good? No, because you know that you are under a very loving, watching eye. So then you are at peace, you know?
yes, absolutely. And there's quite an age difference between you and your brother. So I know you talked about seminary when he went to I forgot what you called it, but there was like a first seminary that you go to. I think he was 13 already when he
Yeah,
decided to go.
that's right.
And you weren't even born yet, right?
No, no.
Okay.
So see, in the family, there are 10 of us. So he's not the first, he's the second. But my eldest brother died at the age of 2. So then, you know, in the Oriental family, you lost a son, which is really a sad moment. And so my parents said, oh, please, God, we will offer our second child to the service of the church. And that's why they call him Thuan. Thuan means in Vietnamese, in agreement with God's will.
Mm.
So when he was born, he knew, reminded on the time, that his life is a gift of God. And between him and me, there are more than 20 years difference because I'm the last. So he is not only a brother, but like a mini dad for me because he's there all the time. He takes me to university, wanted to help me choose my subjects at university. If I have any problem and I think that my dad is too old to understand, then I run to him, you know.
Mhm.
I remember very well that I would be lining up behind the confessional chair because I went to confession with him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so there is that closeness. And he always said to me, when you go to confession with me, don't think you are talking to me, right, Elizabeth? You are talking to God. So don't feel worried about what you say. But I never was worried about what I said to him anyway.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I can't imagine going to my big brother for confession, but like you said, if you can just remember you're not talking to him, you're talking to God, that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
it's funny because I was young enough that I didn't have that shame or whatever.
Mhm.
But I know my sisters and my other brothers who are much older than me, they line up. And then I see them leave that line to go to another line, you know? And so later on, they said to me, yeah, I saw that our brother is behind that veil. So we went to another priest because we didn't want to go to confess our sin to our own brother. But for me, I said, well, I feel comfortable. I just go and tell him whatever is in my mind. But I guess because I'm younger, and so I don't have that sense of worry or anything. And also because he babysat me a lot too. So I don't feel uncomfortable with him. Even before his death, I would tell him, Francis, with all of this trouble that you've gone through in your life, do if you have to go back and start all over again, would you want God to give you a different life? I would ask him all kinds of these questions. And he would say, oh no, I would choose the same life that he has sent me. And I said, is it all worth it? And he said, yes, Elizabeth, is to be able to see the face of God. I still remember that, and that stuck with me, that to see the face of God.
Yes. That stuck with me throughout the book as well, and it reminded me of Saint Teresa of Avila because there's a book called I Want to See God, and it talks about how when she was young, that's what she wanted. She wanted to see God, and so she ran away and thought she would be a martyr so that she could see God sooner.
I
And
know.
I love that theme throughout the book and how your brother talks about how he knew he couldn't actually see God face to face in this life, right? We can't do that, but he could see God in his enemy. And so
Yeah,
I want to talk about his life a little bit. I know he went on a well, first of all, in his youth, he had tuberculosis as well. I know you talked about that with some family members and things. And
yeah.
you've shared that's how you what you consider his first miracle.
Exactly. Because after he was ordained, that's in 53, he was sent out to the north, parish in the middle of the fighting between the French and the communists. And only a few months after he was sent there, the French troops lost heavily, and Vietnam was divided in two in 1954. Vietnam, the north is totally communist, and the south became a republic. And so when he was sent to the north, the weather there is extremely bad. And he, I think, already contracted tuberculosis prior to that. And the weather and the lack of nourishment, because it was during a wartime, perishes very poor. And especially, you never know when the bombing comes, so you're ready to move from one place to another. So he became extremely sick, and the parish priest, who is a French man, he said to him, "Okay, Thuan, I'm going to send you to Saigon, where there is a French military hospital. There they can operate you." So then my brother left the north to go to Saigon, which is now Ho Chi Minh Ville. And that hospital was taken care of by the French St. Paul sisters. And Sister Françoise said to him, "We will feed you a few days, give you a lot of vitamins and blood transfusion first before you will be able to withstand the operation." And so the day before the operation, the surgeon said, "We need the last x-ray to see which lungs are affected. Maybe both lungs are affected. In that case, we'll need to know what to do because we can't remove both lungs." And so he had the x-ray in the morning, and surgery was supposed to be in the afternoon. But then he just stayed in his room and he really prayed for a safe surgery. But nobody came in the afternoon. And the sisters said they don't know either why. And so towards the early evening, the surgeons came, both of them. And they said, "Well, Father Tuan, we don't know what happened in your lungs anymore. We have no answer, but the x-ray shows completely clear lungs. There is no infection, nothing at all. So we don't understand it. So for now, you remain here a couple of days to rest, and then you can go home." So he called my parents, who at that time in the center of Vietnam, and said, "I'm going home, Mom. I'm going to take a plane and arrive home. Could you pick me up? Because they say that I don't have tuberculosis anymore."
That's
Yeah. So
that's
that
incredible.
was I know. So that was the first one. But the second one happened during prison time because he had prostate cancer. So they admitted him in Hanoi to have an operation. And after the operation, he had bad infection due to lack of hygiene. So he was put in a dark room. And the thing is, no doctors or no nurses should intervene at all without permission of the head doctor. And the head doctor, of course, is under the supervision of the government. So he said that he had very high fever. His abdomen was so swollen and extreme pain that he thought that it was the end of him. But at night time, one person came and he said to him, I am a young doctor here, and do not say one word and do not make any noise. I will be able to help you with your infection. So hold on to the flashlight because they weren't allowed to turn on the light. Hold on the flashlight. I will clean your bladder and all of the infection out with some kind of antibiotic solution. It will hurt, but I hope that you will not make any single noise. And after that, I will give you intravenous antibiotic. And do not tell anybody that I did come. And he said that the day after the fever is gone, the stomach became much better and he no longer felt any pain. But he said that he could never find that man so that he could really thank him. And to this day, I wish I would know where that doctor is to thank him, but never could find him.
Wow. And his imprisonment was long. I'm curious with the tuberculosis and things, where does that fall? Your brother went on a pilgrimage to Lourdes and he had a premonition there. He has a very close or had a very close relationship with the Blessed Mother and said that he felt like he would be called to suffer for his country. Was that before or after the tuberculosis?
After,
After.
because after he was cured, then the same bishop who taught him, Bishop Elisabeth, sent him to Rome to study. And during the holidays, we couldn't afford to always buy an air ticket for him to come home. So then he always applied to go to different area where he could hear confession, where he could celebrate mass for those parish priests who are away on holidays. So then they say, "Oh, you speak Vietnamese, you speak English and French, good, and German. So we can get your service in Lourdes. You can sit there and listen to confession for the pilgrims who come from all over the place." So that's when he said he always prayed very intensely in front of the grotto before confession because he wanted to be able to really speak to those people through the Holy Spirit. And so he will pray very hard before confession. And after the day, he will pray again. And during those time in front of the grotto, he kept hearing that voice that I do not promise you a happy life on this earth, but I will welcome you and you will be with me in paradise. And he said, how am I going to say that that is for me? I shouldn't be so arrogant. That was for St. Bernadette. And he kept telling my mother that. I hear that all the time, but it shouldn't be for me, Mom. It should be for other holy men and women. And my mother always said, Thuan, everybody is called to be holy. So maybe you just have to say, I'm listening. If it is for me, give me a sign. And so when he actually went to prison, then he said, Mother Mary, I know this is for me. And then he said, but I know you will be with me. And the day of his arrest was the Assumption, Feast of Assumption. The day of his release was the presentation of Mary in the temple. So he always said, every part of my life is connected closely to our Holy Mother. Yeah.
Yeah. And his imprisonment was 13 years long. 9 years of that, I believe, was solitary. And I just remember reading in the book about his first solitary confinement and the conditions of it was very damp and wet. He wasn't allowed to get out to go to the bathroom, but they would feed him really salty foods. So then he wanted to drink more, but just didn't always have those resources. And I just think about the longest I've gone in silence is an 8-day silent retreat. I cannot imagine 8 months. But not that he was in silence that entire time. They would, I think, did some interrogations and things, but for the most part, just being alone and the anguish that came from that. And I thought it was so beautiful and such a great reminder. At times, he wrote about how you can lose a sense of clarity. I feel like you're losing your mind because the only person to talk to is yourself. And so sometimes, even the Our Father, the words just would not come. But something as simple as just saying, Mary or Jesus or have mercy on me, those were his prayers. And so I think that's just such a great reminder. Sometimes we don't have the words to say, but the Lord hears it.
Yeah, that's right. Because he said prayer is a time when the heart speaks. So it is our heart which is speaking, and God knows exactly everything in our heart anyway. So if we don't remember all the long liturgical prayers, but we just said to God, I'm here. And he did talk about this story in the book, Five Loaves and Two Fish, when people asked him about prayer. And he said, I'm always very impressed by the prayer and the story of this Englishman called Jim. And Jim will come back from lunch, from work at around noon, and Jim would always stop in the church and sit there quietly in a dark corner. And every day he'll go there for a few minutes and then he'll go home. And one day the priest came and said, Jim, I see you here every day, but you only come in for a few minutes and go. And he said, yes, those few minutes I just go in and I said, okay, Jesus, this is Jim, and I have to go home now, but I just stop by to say hello. And then I go home. And every day Jim would do the same. And when Jim was very sick and went to the hospital, the parish priest came to see him in the hospital, and he saw next to the bed, Jim has requested to have two chairs. And so the priest said, so you must have a lot of visitors. You needed two chairs. Usually people only have one. And he said, oh, I always have two visitors. You, Father, who come to hear my confession, give me communion, and the other one is for my special guest. And then the priest said, who is that? And Jim said, that Jesus, because when I was healthy, I come to see him. And now that I'm no longer healthy, I can't go, he come to see me.
Mm.
And the story say that when Jim was the few minutes before he passed, the people in the hospital saw that he looked at the chair, smiled, and passed away. And my brother always said that, you see, these people who don't know long liturgical prayer, but it's their heart that speaks to God. So we need to encourage everybody, even children who don't know long prayers, but they can speak to God, and that is the most beautiful prayers.
Yes. And I love just this idea that we don't have to do a lot to make a big difference. One of the things in the book talked about when Tuan was feeling anxious about being separated from his flock, like he wasn't being able to go out and to serve and say mass for the people. The Lord said to him, why do you torment yourself like this? And then I'd love if you can elaborate on this part. The Lord said to him, you must distinguish between the work of God and God himself.
That's right. And I think in the book, Five Loaves and Two Fish, he speaks very at length about that because he said, sometimes we are tempted to think that we are irreplaceable. And at times we do the work we think we are doing for the glory of God, but it's just because we're passionate about that job, because we love to do it, but not because we are doing it with the intention that is for the glory of God. And so when he was in prison, he's just very frustrated. And he said, look, God, I'm only 48 years old. I am healthy and I'm doing so much good work in my parish and all of this. And suddenly you just allow me to be locked up in here and I can't do this and I can't do that. And for a while, he was in that mode of thinking. And then suddenly he heard one voice saying, but Tuan, you forgot. It is for me or for the work that you are doing, because I can replace you with many other people who can do better than you, because I can do better than you, Thuan, don't forget. So it is me that you should follow and not the work that you think you're doing for me. And before his death, that thing came again. People would come in and visit him, and people would say to him, "Oh, Cardinal, we are so worried that the Vietnamese community will be without a head and that the work in the justice and peace won't be this and that. The book that the compendium for social justice of the church that you started and nearly done, and who is going to finish and all that." And he said, "No." Mother Teresa said, "You are one of those many pencils in the world, and each one of you can use that pencil that God created for you to write the story and to write the love of God for other people. God can choose anybody. After me, look at St. Peter. After St. Peter, there are popes coming one after another. So it is God that you should be just focused on. And even on the deathbed, he still tried to get that message to all of the people who came to see him, including bishops and priests and all that.
What a instance of growth and humility. I
Yeah,
think that's
it
such
is.
a beautiful reminder for all of us. I think especially as women who try to take on so much and feel like if we don't do it, everything is gonna fall apart. And it's not gonna fall apart if we don't get everything done perfectly or done the way that we think that it needs to be done. God will take care of it or he will send someone else to take care of it. We don't have to try to carry it all.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, Mother Mary, we at the wedding in Cana, she just said to the people, "Do whatever he tells you to do." She's not going to say, "Well, I've got to run around and do this and do that." And sometimes I think you are so right as a mother, as a grandmother like myself. We think that we have to do all of these things morning and night, from taking the kids to school and picking them up, taking them to soccer, to music. We just forgetting to enjoy each present moment and leave it in the hands of God, because He gave us kids. He knows what to give us to bring up kids, right?
Mhm.
So if we are totally in His hands and completely trusting in Him, then I think we can take time to just take a deep breath and then focus on what we have to do at this moment and do it well.
Yes. And your brother, while he was in his imprisonment, he was not completely inactive. He was able to get a lot of letters out. He did a lot of writing. How was he able to do that?
Well, there are some periods when he was able to, because, for example, at the beginning, when he was arrested in 1975, he was under house arrest. So he was able to still sit there and write on the meditations, which became later on the Road of Hope. He was again in house arrest in 79. Then he was able to sit there and write the book, The Pilgrims on the Road of Hope. And the Road of Hope under the light of Council Vatican II. He wrote those two during the house arrest in 79 to 82. And also, when he was in isolation at the police station guarded by two policemen in the 80s, prior to his release, he was able to teach the guards languages. And so he was able to get papers because he had to prepare lesson. So he prepared dictionaries for them to learn French or to learn Italian or to learn Spanish. So he was able to get all of those papers, and then he will write also meditations. He will write the words of different Latin songs for the God and teach them how to sing Veni Creator and Regina Pacis and all of that. So he was able then to get some papers because they gave him paper to teach them, and he would be writing meditation. And day after day, when they became friends with him, they would take those meditation and then send it out to the rest of us. But most of the beautiful meditations, he wrote it and he gave it to them. And so, when the cause of sainthood was open, those guards came to Rome to give witness to the life of my brother, and gave it to us, those meditation. And we were able to translate it for the congregation of canonization.
Wow. And just to be clear, for those of you listening, these are the prison guards. So there, if I remember right, there was one that was like a nighttime guard and one that was a daytime guard over your brother. And over time, he befriended them, and they realized
Yeah.
like this is a peaceful, joyful man.
Yes, that's right. Mr. Gong, the one who sing every morning Veni Creator, running up and down the stairs, he came. So we welcomed them in Rome. And when I saw them arriving at the office of Cardinal Turkson by taxi, we ran to them just thinking that they will not be able to negotiate the money or how to pay the taxi. But when we arrived there and we asked them, "Are you okay?" He said, "Oh, yeah, we know a few words because your brother taught us. So we know how to pay and to ask where to go and so on." And then we took them up to the office of Cardinal Turkson, and the cardinal was so impressed that they were able to come to give witness. And he said, "So, Mr. Kong, could you please tell me what is the most important memory of you living with this man whom you call a friend of yours?" And Mr. Kong just quietly said, "I'm not a Catholic. I've never known anything about the faith, but living with him, he told me that if he didn't love us, who are supposed to be his enemy, then he's not worthy of being a follower of Jesus Christ." And for that, I do believe, he said, that Jesus Christ does exist. I thought that was so moving for a communist to say that. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
and at times I think that love always is the beginning of evangelization, right?
Yeah. And one of the requirements for sainthood is heroic virtue, which is how this book is broken out. And the chapters are named after virtues. But going back to the guards again, I think of one instance of heroic virtue is it's the prison guard, but they're both there overnight and it gets cold in the evening. And they each have these tiny little blankets and they end up sharing their blankets. So I just think that's one little way heroic virtue is not just helping the person that you love, it's helping the people who are opposing you, the people
Yeah,
who are persecuting you.
yeah, that's right. And Mr. Gong always loved to say that. He said, "Oh, yeah, I can't believe that he trusted to be so close to him at night, because people were afraid that, oh, you may strangle me at night or you may give me a knife or something." But he said, no, he was extremely careful because he doesn't make too much noise. In the morning, he gets up extremely early. And so he will celebrate Mass in a corner quietly by himself, not to disturb me. And then he will not at all disturb me until I get up, and then at that time, he start to boil a cup of coffee or a tea or water for himself. He said, and I really respect the fact that he is very respectful of people's around him and people's life and people's attitude. Then he does not really create a big fuss about anything at all, and he loves to whatever story that he has in his childhood he share with us, and so we know all about your family. He told me, the guy said, "Oh yeah, we know all the name of your brother and sisters, and we know exactly where you live." He tells me all about it, and there is that bond of trust between them. And Mr. Gong was so amazed at how could you trust your enemy. Yeah.
You talked about celebrating the mass, and that's one of the stories that I think has impacted me the most in the book is how your brother was able to celebrate Mass and receive the Eucharist. And do you want to tell that story of how he was able to get wine into the prison?
Yeah, because before the communists took over in 1973, I remember I was back in Vietnam to visit the family. And my brother had a family meeting with friends and relatives, and he said, "You know for sure now the communists will arrive and will take over the entire country. Us, bishop and priest and nun, will be locked up or killed or sent away. So if that happens, and if I am able to send out words to you guys that I need medicine for my stomach, then please know that I need wine and host to celebrate Mass." So we listened to it, but we said, you know what? By that time, how are we going to be able to know where to send and all this? But we said, yeah, for sure, we will do that. And he did send out that message. And so, faithful as well, the family, we went to the pharmacy and asked for medicine for stomach. We kept the bottle, but inside is not medicine for stomach. It was wine, on the wine. And then we also sent a long flashlight so that he could see himself when he had to go outside in the field for toilet. But between the big batteries, we put the host in between. And it is really miraculous that the God who received this and gave to him did not open the battery to see if we did put anything dangerous in there. That was really miraculous. And so that's how he was able to celebrate Mass. Yeah.
I went to Mass this morning, and after I received communion and I was kneeling there, whoever was around me thought I was probably losing my mind, but I was moved to tears. I was picturing your brother, and he talks about the 3 drops of wine that he used because it wasn't like he could just had an unlimited supply of wine, and so he talked about the 3 drops on his hand and just his offering to the Lord every day, and it just made me feel so privileged to have the opportunity to go to Mass every day, and his commitment to ensuring that even in that imprisonment, he knew how important the Eucharist was for that
Yeah.
grace, and
Yeah.
so that was so beautiful.
And I think my brother had that faith in the presence of Jesus because most of the time people will think like a symbol, but not really the presence of Jesus, right? In the Eucharist. But he had that faith when he was young because when my mother's sister, my aunt, had tuberculosis, and nobody dared to bring communion to her because they are afraid to contract the tuberculosis. And so the parish priest asked, "Is there anybody who helped me carry the Eucharist?" And those days, they don't just put the Eucharist in their pockets and then drive away to that house. Those days, parish priests go by bicycle or walk. So what happened in our country at that time is that the parish priest will hold the Eucharist, and then the altar boy or another helper will ring the bell all along the street until the house of the person who is sick. And anybody along the street will kneel down or stay silent in respect because Jesus is passing through. So my mother said that my brother volunteered and said, I can carry the bell every day before school or after school to auntie's house to accompany the priest. And later on, when my parents and my grandmother or other relatives asked, weren't you afraid that you may contract tuberculosis? And he said, no, but it's more important to bring life to auntie before she passed away because Jesus is life to us. So he already had that faith, strong, strong faith in the power of the Jesus presence at that age already.
What about you? For your own growing up with all these holy people around you, with your big brother, have you always felt that same presence of God?
Well, I'm so glad you asked because so many people probably have gone through that thing that I've gone through. During the war in Vietnam, I totally get very frustrated and almost revolting against God. How could you allow this to happen? How could you allow this violence to happen? And so I was detached from the church for a period of 2 or 3 years, and especially during university time. At that time, I was very attracted to the movement in France called the existentialist. It means put God away. It is our human actions that define what we do on this earth. And my brother knew all along that I did that and that I was doing a master thesis on that. And what I really respect was he was never judgmental or condemning me, but was always there watching and guiding. So he asked me, "Oh, how is your thesis coming along?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm about to present it. Could you go through it and see if you understand clearly, or if I have any grammatical mistakes? Can you tell me?" So he took time to read. And then he asked me, "So, Lisbeth, now that you're convinced that this is what bring happiness, have you found happiness?" And I broke out crying because I didn't. So I said, "No, I haven't found happiness at all. But now what am I going to do? I've already written the thesis, I did all the research, but I have not found happiness." And he said, "Then you just simply be honest with the professor and say, 'This is my thesis. I've done all the research. But now at the end, I have a big question. Is this the answer to human happiness?'" That can be also a truthful way of telling the readers that this is what I believe. But now, after all of this, it remains still a question, because God always accept people who are searching. That was a time when I totally came back to church and knew that no, I've gone on the wrong path. And ever since then, I knew that the Eucharist is something that really fortify you, and it is the love of God who is always there watching you if you are sincerely searching for him. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. I think it's so important for everyone to hear. Sometimes we hear the stories of
Yeah.
the saints or the
Yeah.
aspiring saints or the soon to be saints, and we think they just had this from the time they were little, and
Yeah.
there's no hope for the rest of us. But
Yeah,
there is hope.
I know. I share that with all my students, and I said to them all the time, the important thing is that you are searching for God. If you haven't found him today, but keep on searching, he will be there and he will find you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it reminds me of one of the teachings of your brother too. I think he was talking to someone who was considering leaving seminary and felt like, well, God's just going to reject me if I don't become a priest and I don't feel worthy enough. And your brother reminded him that God has a need for other vocations too, but the most important thing is to avoid evil. Sinning is evil, but it is much worse to lose the idea of what sin is. And then
yeah,
he goes on to just talk about express trains. Some go straight there and some have a lot of stops along the way, but they both get to the same destination.
that's right.
That's what I'm hearing in your story too, is there are stops along the way, there are detours, but as long as we keep searching, the Lord is gonna get us to our destination.
That's right. Because there are people who've gone through difficult time in marriage and all that. And my brother would always said to them, some people take a high speed train, but some people have to stop many stops. But the destination is the same. And so every stop, don't think as a failure, but always think as an opportunity to get to know more people, to take it as more experiences in your life. And one day, one of the lady did share to me that she went through a very abusive marriage, and finally she separated and just brought up her kids on her own. And then she said that she has gained much more compassion for people in the same situation as she is and became a social worker. She said, your brother helped me to know that and to recognize that whatever cross that God sends you, and if you are absolutely entrusting everything to Him, then you know that whatever difficulty you've gone through, that is an occasion to be an evangelization person to other people who've gone through the same situation and to give them hope and to be there to help them. So I find that is so good for the world we live in now. There are so many of these stories going on, and not to give up in life, that every situation offers us an experience and a way to become holier and to help other people along the way who've gone through like us.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you share with us just briefly, once your brother got out of prison, and we didn't even talk about why they arrested him or any of those things, you guys are going to have to go buy the book. But once he was released, what did the rest of his life look like?
When he was released, they wanted him out completely out of Vietnam, and he wanted to be simply a parish priest somewhere in Vietnam, but the government said no. So he was released and he visited my parents. And I remember all of the journalists, media people were waiting for him to ask him, what is the power that allows you to survive in prison? And he said, everybody is talking about power and heroic virtue. For me, it is only the presence of Jesus and his love that helped me survive. And after that, he didn't have any job for about 2 or 3 years. Vatican didn't have any job for him, and Vietnam didn't want him. So he was just going from country to country to give a retreat, meditation, to help some refugees resettle, to be able to meet with all the refugees and give them hope and help them resettle in the parish, and meet up with some of the Australian bishops, American bishops, to French bishops, so that those refugees will be getting enough support. It's only in 1994 that one of the head of the dicastery, at that time we call it the Pontifical Council of Justice and Peace, so the French cardinal was retiring, and that's why John Paul II named my brother vice president, and that's when he started to work for the Pontifical Council of Justice and Peace, and that's where he also died working there. Yeah.
Wow. And why is this beatification process? First of all, what has it been like for you, and why is it so important to you and your family? What do you want people to remember about your brother?
I think the legacy that he always wanted to leave behind is that only love and reconciliation and forgiveness that can bring back peace and harmony in personal life as well as in political life and in the world. And that is the message that I think our wounded world needs so much, because we just go on fighting. Where is the end of it if we don't know how to sit down and forgive? I think that's the most important legacy, and hope in God and entrusting everything to God. And that I think that is a very important legacy for this world. Yeah.
Amen. Again, the book that we've been talking about, or one of the books, your brother has several that were inspired by his letters and his retreats that he did, but this one is co-authored by you and Father Leclerc, and the name of it is Cardinal Nguyen Van Thuan, Man of Joy and Hope. It is by Ignatius Press. I will link it in the show notes so you guys can all find it. But before we close, Elisabeth, I would love to ask you this question. I ask all of my guests, do you have a prayer tip for our audience or a favorite scripture verse that you would like to share?
I'm always impressed by the story in the gospel of the little boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish. that is so close to me because like you or like me or everybody else out there, whether we are in a nursing home or we are a student at work or we are an artist or we are a man working in a factory, God does give us a few talents, some more and some less, but whatever we receive, and if we are ready to cooperate with God, He can make many wonderful things in our life for the church. And that is a passage of scriptures that I absolutely love and is very close to my life. And the prayer that I said all the time, every day getting up in the morning is, Mary, today I'm just like you. I'm just going to say yes. I don't know what the day is going to give me. I don't know whom I'm going to meet or whatever is happening today, but just help me to say yes and live every present moment. And that I did a few years ago when I had stage 4 non-Hodgkin lymphoma cancer. And I remember I said, I'm just saying yes. I don't know where my life's going to be, but whatever you send to my life, I know that you give me enough strength to survive today. And I'm now in remission, Kylie. And I say the same prayer every day.
Praise God. I'm sure your brother's praying for you too.
Yes, I know. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh,
Ah,
you have been such a blessing, and your book has been a blessing to me as well. I have thoroughly enjoyed not only learning the history, but really those beautiful teaching moments that are in there. There is one that talks about what could be more active than inner renewal and transformation. It's the story of Martha and Mary. And I think a lot of people listening, we want to be the Marys, but we're the Marthas. We want to be really hands on doing all the things.
yes,
But it just reminded us that our times of prayer, their intimacy with God,
yeah,
and He takes care of all of the other stuff. We don't
that's
have
right.
to do so much, just like you said earlier, we aren't
Irreplaceable.
irreplaceable, yes. We're
Yeah,
not so irreplaceable.
yeah.
And our little, the Lord multiplies, just like you said. So I am so incredibly blessed to have you here. Thank you so much for all the work that you're doing to make your brother's story known, but also just for sharing your own faith with us.
And I'm so grateful for people like you that you are doing such beautiful work to evangelize in a very happy way and persistent each day. And I thank God for people like you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for having me, Kylie.
Absolutely. Beautiful souls, thank you again for journeying with me. If you have been blessed by this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a review. Be sure to screenshot it, share it on your social media stories, and don't forget to tag me on Instagram or Facebook at Kylie M. Hine. Stay persistent in prayer, protect your peace, and as always, share the light of Christ with everyone around you.